The great ones, they're different. They really are. Not better, just different. Sure, there's a physical power, a mental strength, a complex but resolute constitution too. There's a whole lot more than just the measurables. That's something else, that intangible. It separates us from them. Welcome to the Legends series on Andy Raymond Unfiltered. There's a lot of legends, icons, not so many. This one is every bit of it. A face of an industry, the face of a brand, and a gentleman, one that hasn't changed a bit along the journey. But who is Dick Johnson?
Oh boy, just a guy who I suppose grew up in Coorparoo in Queensland, in Brisbane. Lived on the south side all our life sort of thing, and I had a father he's an Irishman, he was an Irishman, and a very caring mother, and basically just grew up, all they ever wanted to do was drive cars, and I was fortunate enough to be able to do that for a living.
The face of Ford for over 40 years, but the journey actually started in a Holden.
Oh, well, no one's perfect, I suppose, given the fact that my old man, albeit he was an Irishman, as I said, and he was the sales manager of Eagers, who were the biggest Holden distributors, or General Motors distributors, even back then, in Brisbane. So obviously he drove Holden, so I was brought up with those, and I enjoyed sort of the fact that I started racing Holdens, obviously for that, because I was very passionate about it.
Yeah.
And then the opportunity came for me from when Brian Burt Ford said to me, would you like to drive my car? And after I'd been paying for all of my own racing over many, many years, and right at that point in time, I couldn't have cared if it was a Skoda, mate. I would have jumped at it, and which I did. And fortunately for me, it's been a good journey.
Back then, did you think motor racing was a genuine career path, or was it more, and very simply, a young fella having fun?
Well, it started off being a young fella having fun, and it got to the point where I became reasonable at it, and I thought, well, the opportunity's there if I could make a living, or try to make a living out of something you enjoy doing. Isn't that the main aim of life, is to be able to do something you enjoy? When was that point? When was the point you figured I might be able to combine passion and profession? Well, it needs more than one person. Like Julie was, a huge part of it, for the simple reason that it was very interesting because we got to a point back in 1979 when, with Brian Burt unfortunately died in 1978 from cancer at a very young age, and then I ended up driving for 12 months with Brian Burt Ford still, which he was the guy who bought it, along with a couple of other guys, was the general sales manager, and through respect to the family, they kept the motor racing going for 12 months, and then when CAMS decided they'd change the rules again, and they'd sort of go from the old group days where we had hotted up road cars and things like that, but they changed things because it got a bit too difficult, and Brian Burt Ford said, John Harris said, look, we can't do this anymore. It's going to be too expensive. Well, that's happened a number of times through my career, even with John Zupp and things when I was driving his car. But so what I did is I said to Julie, I said, look, we got two choices here. I said, we got a pretty good business in the service station. We had a Shell Servo, and I said we can do one of two things. I said I can, to be quite honest, I can sort of give up racing, concentrate on the business, and and we can sort of go on doing what we're doing and just try and enjoy life in that respect. Otherwise, I can see an opportunity here where we can mortgage a house and get enough money to buy the bits off Brian Burt Ford with this new category that was being created, and we can go forward, and I reckon there's a fair chance that we can win. And I said, if we do that, I said I'll be the happiest guy in the world. But if we just have the servo, you got to probably live with the most miserable prick you've ever met. So
you'd remortgage the house. You got a young family. This is 1979, 1980, and the next 12 months was maybe Australian sport's biggest emotional roller coaster ride, not just for the driver, but for the people watching on TV and the supporters of motor racing. What unfolded over 12 months? Amazing.
It certainly was. It's something that could never ever plan. Something like what ensued after this was just amazing. We sort of went to Bathurst with a car that was really capable of winning the race, because that was obviously what I wanted to do all my life. Was the biggest prize in the whole land was winning Bathurst, and everyone wants to win Bathurst. So we went there with a car that was capable of winning. Pole position was worth $10,000.
Big money those days.
It was huge money. You're talking about 1980.
Yeah.
And the competition was pretty stiff, with obviously Brocky and Kevin Bartlett and things like that, and with the Channel 9 Camaro, and KB was on pole by like 0.2 of a second or 1/10 of a second or something, and second prize for that was the centre of a donut. So I ended up with the centre of the donut. And anyway, as the race started on the Sunday morning, I took off and I was leading it reasonably well, because I knew if I ran fairly hard for the first 15 or so laps, because I knew that Brocky didn't have the out and out pace to be able to stay with us, and KB in the Camaro, they had obviously some issues which were a bit of an Achilles heel, which was the brakes on the Camaro, and everything worked to plan. Like KB's brakes fell apart, and he was in the pits after about 10 or 12 laps, and Brocky at that point had, trying to keep with us, sort of clipped a slower car when lapping it across the top of the mountain and damaged the car, pulled into the pits, and at that point we'd put a lap on him, and I thought, well, I can sort of have a bit of a cruise now. And during that, after we passed Brock and put a lap on him, I thought, well, I'll back off a bit, which I did, and then I get up through the cutting, and I see this tilt tray truck, which is unheard of these days, but back then the race would continue.
It was an obstacle, yeah.
Well, they'd just put a white flag out, which denoted that it was a slower vehicle up there, and the thing is that. That was back then. They used to sort of have these tilt tray trucks going around if something broke down or there was an incident or something like that. And the race continued. They just put yellow flags out, and they'd go and pick these things up. And the tilt tray trucks obviously used to go and pick up all the broken down Commodores and that. And anyway, as I sort of crested the hill there, I see this truck, which had stopped certainly to the left of the road. It's not very wide. It's only, I think the road there's about 7.5 metres or 8 metres wide. And as I approached it, I see there's the back of the truck, and then between the truck and the bank there was this rock that sort of was on the road, and so rather than running the back of the truck, I decided I'd try and get round the rock, and ended up hitting the rock, and that was the end of the race for me. It sort of wrecked the car and things like that. And what ensued after that was pretty much history, where people started ringing the Channel 7, and that's when things really started to happen.
Griffin Air Conditioning offers the highest quality of air conditioning sales and service across the Sydney metropolitan area. providing installation and maintenance to commercial, domestic and industrial customers. Working with this team, you'll be guaranteed the latest services, technology and developments in the industry. Visit griffinair.com.au and tell them we sent you for a cool deal.
Amazing in the fact it was the famous True Blue XD Falcon. As we said, you'd remortgage the house, you would put all the chips on the table, and your first instinct, I guess, was to walk away. You were ready to say, that's me, back to the garage we go.
Well, I was about to give everything to the bank manager, I know that. Yeah. So, but, as it turned out, with what ensued after that, with the people ringing up wanting to donate money and that to get us back on the road, was one of the most humbling things that's ever happened to me.
The punters started donating money. Ford then corporately started matching dollar for dollar.
That was Edsel Ford, who was out here as the Vice President of Ford Australia.
That type of behaviour or gesture or honour or respect shown to an athlete, as we sit here in 2020, that just couldn't or wouldn't happen these days, would it?
No, it certainly wouldn't. And Edsel, who I still have a great relationship, to this day. He's been out here since then, to sort of take part of some of the events we've had here, and he wants to come back for Bathurst. So, we'll see what happens.
Theories, questions, fictions, but not many facts about what actually did happen on that day. How did that rock get there? Do you believe you've ever found the truth?
Well, I have actually, because a few years ago, and it wasn't that long ago actually, these people who were residents of the mountain at that point in time, and because they're locked in obviously for the day, and not particularly interested in motor racing at all, they just happened to be there, and they were sitting, because they live nearby, they were sitting on the hill there, and they said they were just sitting there, and there wasn't a person within 50 metres either side of them until these two guys who had been out on the juice all night.
Had a few, yeah.
Yeah, and they were pretty second-hand, I think. And the only reason they took any notice is the fact that they came up and sat down virtually in front of them. One was sitting on a rock with his head in his hands. Oh. The other one was just lying down with his head on a rock and playing with this other rock with his feet, and accidentally, obviously, dislodged this rock, which ended up on the road. So that's the one that I got. But they took off at 100 mile an hour, and they've never to be seen.
Never been seen since.
If I could find them now, I'd give them a great big hug.
The stories that sport provides and the roller coaster it takes us on, it's why I love it. But 12 months later, you win Bathurst for the first time. No one can write a script quite like that.
Well, it started a bit before the Bathurst, actually, because that was the first year, 1981, where I had a serious tilt at the Touring Car Championship to run every race and things like that. And it's not like they do it these days. It was I had one guy, Roy, and myself, and we drove the truck everywhere. We worked on the car everywhere. I used to build the engines and the gearboxes and diffs and things, and worked on the vehicle as well. And Roy, we used to sleep in the truck because
really?
Couldn't afford any real accommodation, so we stayed in the truck everywhere we went. And because it had a little kitchenette in the front of it, sort of thing, and anyway, we sort of ran around the championship, and the last round of the championship was at Lakeside in 1981.
Home track, without a doubt, next to Bathurst, the very next best track in the whole country. It's a fabulous little piece of road, and anyway, Brock and I sort of went into that race, the final race, separated by 1 point, and whoever beat who was going to win the championship. And it was a hell of a battle from just the start. We were both on the front row,
And as it turns out, I was fortunate enough to beat him by sort of a car length and win the championship in 1981 for the first time. And between that and Bathurst, after we ended up winning Bathurst, albeit a different sort of Bathurst, I was fortunate enough to say to myself, well, I think I've given back a little bit to those people that sort of, really trusted me for what I was doing, and for that I've been eternally grateful.
Your home of anything auto is speedcafe.com. News, features, results, forums, calendars, jobs and more. The #1 independent resource on the web. Get your daily racing fix at speedcafe.com. What are your first memories of Peter?
Unbeknownst to me, he was. I was in the first intake of National Service.
65?
65, yeah. And unbeknownst to me at that point, 2 huts down in a different platoon was Rocky. So
this is Blimey Barracks in Wagga Wagga?
This is at Wagga Wagga, at Kapuka.
Wow. 2 doors down.
2 doors down, or 2 huts down, along with a bunch of other guys as well. So
did you know each other then?
No, we didn't. No, it's only when we started, obviously when he used to come up here motor racing, that I actually met him.
What was special about the Johnson-Brock rivalry over the years? Was it Johnson and Brock, or was it Ford and Holden?
Oh, a bit of both, I think. It was just, we had a good relationship. Rocky was a very different person from when I first met him to later in his career. But we got on extremely well. We used to, on occasions, we'd socialise, after an event somewhere and have a couple of drinks. And they weren't green tea or anything. I can tell you, but
proper stuff.
Proper stuff. Yeah. Men's drinks.
What's your standout memory of Peter, the man and the driver?
Obviously a very talented guy. Had a tremendous amount of self-belief, which I think may have been his undoing. I don't know, but that's only sort of my opinion. But at the end of the day, you've just got to have great respect for everything which he did.
Yep.
And the best part about Rocky was the fact that if he couldn't win a race fair and square, well, he wouldn't. There's any amount of times he could have tipped me off the road at that race meeting at Lakeside and in other events, but we used to race each other fair and square.
A sign of respect, but going both ways.
Yeah, going both ways, absolutely. Everything I do, have done all my life is I always put myself in the other person's position before I make a decision what I want to do, and for me, I think that's probably been one of the better things I've ever done.
I think there was probably a lot of you guys like that in a wonderful era in Australian motor racing that were gentlemen, were respectful gentlemen, whether it was yourself or Brock or Alan Moffat, Allan Grice, Colin Bond, just a wonderful group of blokes.
Yeah, but there were some loose cannons in there
Absolutely,
too.
Absolutely,
But it wasn't a matter of, after you, sir, or anything like that. I can tell you, it was, it was full on combat when you're out there, but fair and square.
Back to Bathurst, and technology's unavoidable, especially in motor racing. Drivers now, to a large degree, complement the car. Back then, a driver made the car. You'd fight and wrestle the steering wheel the entire time, especially at a joint like Bathurst. 83, Bathurst in the Saturday shootout. You're wrestling the car across the top of the mountain on your way to what would have been a good time, and then an horrific crash. Have you ever thought of that one? How the hell did I walk away?
Well, it's a strange thing, you're always sort of, when you're qualifying,
certainly there. And these cars aren't, by any means, they were never perfect, I can assure you. They were, compared to the cars today are proper purpose-built race car.
Yep.
And they're virtually a Formula One with a body on them.
Yeah. And you drove a hotted up road car.
Well, hotted up taxi, yeah. So, and it was one of those situations where, you know, I sort of felt the car was pretty good, but it had a few bits and pieces I didn't like about it at that point in time, and that was clearly obvious because we're you know, Bathurst is a different place today. They've got fences all the way around and things like that, but coming out of Forest Elbow, there was a concrete wall that went for a distance, and at the end of the concrete wall they had stacked up tyres that were full of concrete, which protruded a bit from the fence, you know, and they're for the people that every other day of the year that sort of drive around the opposite way and didn't want to run into a concrete wall. So, and I sort of lobbed there and I sort of just touched the wall a bit, which you do because you use every bit of the road and anything else that might be there to help you. And when I got to the end of the wall, and I can show you downstairs, some guy presented it to me about 2 years ago, was the tie rod end that
really
it hooked the front wheel and broke the tie rod end
and turned you right.
And you know, when it landed on the right end front wheel, it sort of took off into the scrub, and it was just one of those situations. And I thought about that time, I thought, geez, I could be in a bit of trouble here. And fortunately for me, once the car had stopped, I tried to get out the driver's door, which was impossible.
Yeah.
And so I just crawled around the great big camera that was in there, and I got out the passenger side. And once I got out that door, I can't remember another thing till I was back in the pits. Fortunately for me, it worked out all right.
You mentioned your wife Jill earlier. She's been there on this whole journey with you. Has she ever once said, "Okay, that's it. I can't take this anymore"?
Absolutely not.
Really?
Yep. Like we've this year, what are we? 50 years this year. So,
congratulations.
Yeah. Well, it's a marathon, I suppose, isn't it? But, but you know, and that's the thing. You know, marriages are things you have ups and downs with and things like that. But never once has she ever tried to say no. You've got to give this up because we need a new bathroom or kitchen or something like that. It's just one of these things where I was lucky to pick the right one.
Any elite athlete will tell you it takes more than just being physically fit to be at your best. And our friends at Galaxy Finance can have you at the top of your financial game. From home loans to investments and self-managed super funds, they provide complete solutions. Call Galaxy Finance on 1300 91 7740 and mention you heard it on Raymond Unfiltered to get an obligation-free chat to see how Galaxy Finance can assist you. So many great times. The touring car titles, 81, 82, 84, 88, 89. The two more Bathurst wins in 89 and 94. But emotionally, did any of these achievements quite stack up to the 1000 win in 81, 12 months after the Rock?
That was the 81 Bathurst was a little bit hollow for the simple reason it didn't go the full distance.
Yep.
And obviously people question one's ability to finish the last 20-odd laps or whatever it was. But I had absolutely no doubt whatsoever that the car was, fit enough to be able to, and it did because it ran the Gold Coast race after that and still sort of went as good as it ever could, And to be quite honest, I think the most satisfying Bathurst, I think, was 1989 because I think it might have been done once before by Brocky, but we we won. We led every single lap of the race, and won, quite comfortably. And every Bathurst has a different feel to it and everything like that. And even 94, that was when I had to get on the radio to JB when a young snotty-nosed Craig Leons passed him because he missed the brake pedal. Yeah. And I said, mate, I got on the radio and I said, mate, you're not going to let some snotty-nosed bloody kid beat the famous John Bow. I said, so get your finger out. And he did. He sort of... And JB can really step up to it when he has to, and he's just a great relationship I had with him and still have.
What about 92? What are your memories there? Because that was close but not close enough, and probably the most controversial Bathurst of the modern era. Yeah.
Well, that was different, to say the least. That was probably one of the Bathursts where I believe that both JB and myself probably drove the best we'd ever driven.
Yep, at the top of your game.
At the top of our game. And mind you, when I gave up, I was bloody 55. Like, I never won a touring car championship race until I was 35. So you got to add that up with the guys today. They're done and dusted before they're 40, for God's sake. You know. But I think that event was pretty special. It was a hard fought event and one that I really enjoyed.
You were often seen as the Aussie battler. The invention of Racecam, in-car cameras and microphones, did it add to the Dick Johnson legend? Because it seemed that you were extremely comfortable talking and driving.
Yeah, that was that's something that people miss. Like, so many people comment to me now that, gee, they really miss the days when you used to talk when you're driving around and stuff like that. And obviously for legal reasons they don't do it today because, the feather duster will come out or some damn thing. But I really enjoyed that. It was a part, and I loved being part of the development of the whole category of touring car racing in Australia, because it was something that got the imagination of people, especially Bathurst. And I enjoy a bit of humour. I'd like to think that, I always try and put a humorous spin on something, even if it's a serious situation. And that for me was a perfect avenue for me to display who I was as a person.
As your Bathurst career started to wind down in 98 and 99, you got to share the driver's seat at Bathurst with your son Stephen. How special was that?
That was something that I think every driver would dearly love to be able to do, and I know it's been done with a couple of guys, but to do it with your son, and he, he was an extremely, and still is an extremely good driver, and to be quite honest, much better than me. It's just that how the younger generation sort of developed. He was very unlucky in 94 when we actually won Bathurst. Had that car not have been put in the bunker by the other driver, they could have very well been second to us. I can tell you, because he really showed what he can do around there, and especially when you look back to in 2007 or 6 or 7, whenever it was, when it started raining at the last 15 laps of Bathurst, and they were on slick tyres. That just showed the ability.
Steve was always respected as firstly a good young man, secondly a good young driver. Did he have it tougher because his last name was Johnson?
Absolutely. Probably the worst thing that ever happened to him, was the fact that, the opportunities he could have had without that name would have been just something totally different, and I think his career would have been much more rewarding.
I'm going to say 2007, he finished on the podium at Bathurst. Not as a driver, not as a team owner, but with your wife by your side. How did that make Dad feel, seeing the offspring standing up there?
Oh, it was pretty special actually, and that was a race where it was so close to being on the top step that it just got away, and obviously at the time the three of them were sort of hammer and tongs for the last number of laps, and in those conditions, I can assure you that is not an easy job to do.
Are there moments at Bathurst where, as talented as the driver is, as confident as they are, and as faultless as the equipment can be, that it still takes your breath away, and that fear or terror or shock still reverberates through your body?
Well, it certainly does, and if you don't, you're an idiot, because you're going to kill yourself. You've got to have a respect for not only the people around you, but certainly for your own well-being. And when you're in a situation where you don't think about those things, I think you're in a position of that I certainly wouldn't put myself in.
Amongst a host of achievements, 5-time touring car champion, 3-time winner of the Great Race, Hall of Famer, a Q150 member, and an Order of Australia in the Queen's List. Is there a moment, an achievement, or a reward that stands out above any other?
Actually, not really. I think the greatest achievement that I have is being able, or have done, is being a good husband and certainly bringing up a good family.
Great answer too. Probably gives us an example of why you're celebrating your 50th anniversary this year.
Yeah, and things only just keep getting better.
Ford versus Holden, a great Australian rivalry that in some different periods over the years could very well have kept the industry alive because the customers genuinely buy into it. Is that a fair call?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that really hasn't gone away, because those people still, irrespective of whether it's a Mustang or a Camaro or whatever it might be, there's always been the Ford v GM. Doesn't matter where it is. And even the Americans, when they come over, they just cannot believe just how the rivalry is over here.
How passionate it is.
It is extremely passionate, and a good rivalry, not one that's vicious or anything like that. It's one that's much respected between both camps, and you see that on a lot of occasions when we even get a lot of emails and stuff from people who have supported Holden all their life and support a Holden driver or something, and they respect the talent and the achievements that some of the Ford guys do.
If you're enjoying Andy Raymond Unfiltered, the Legend series, we'd love for you to go to Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening and subscribe to the podcast and give us a 5-star rating and review. Best weekly review wins an Unfiltered Trucker's hat. The two tribes almost came together for a while there in early 90s against Nissan and the GTR.
Yeah, that was interesting, wasn't it? That was a situation where I think something came in that was clearly had an advantage.
Yeah.
And the rules didn't cover it. So, but in saying that, I think it was good racing at the time, and certainly it's turned into a situation where we created, should I say, a situation where each team owner or person who owns a team could then own part of the action, and that was something that's and maybe one day we'll write a book about that, because it's one that is worth a really good read.
How was the transition to the real world following your retirement? Some athletes say they don't cope, some do. Which category does Dick Johnson fall into?
I'd had enough.
Yeah, enough was enough?
Yeah, well, like when you're starting to, and even the journos would say, when are you old pricks going to sort of get out of the deal and let some of these younger guys have a go? Well, it wasn't so much that, mate, but I just felt you don't lose any one thing.
Yep.
You lose a little bit of everything.
That's interesting.
And being a competitive person, I was, in the last 5-6 years, I was very frustrated because of the fact that
Had you just lost a little bit of everything?
I was feeling not uncomfortable, but certainly that I couldn't give it what it needed to sort of be successful.
The real world can often be more brutal than the racetrack. Unfortunately, not everyone is always as honest or transparent as we'd like to think. A decade after retirement, I think your quote was, "I was on the bones of my arse financially." Yeah. How difficult was that?
Yeah, that was, my biggest problem there is I trusted too many people, and people unfortunately take advantage of one's at times. So it's something that's in the past. It's something that, fortunately for me, a guy came along who was a fan as a kid, and he came and virtually rescued me from what was certain disaster, and not financially.
Yeah.
Like he contributed a bit, but at the end of the day, ran the place.
Yeah.
And not paid, just shifted up from Melbourne to here and ran the business, and he still runs it today. And that's Dr. Ryan's story.
How much do you owe him?
An awful lot, mate, to be quite honest. You know, like the way I've always looked at things is that, and I honestly believe that the only place that success comes before work's in the dictionary.
Love it.
And that's, you know, basically where I sort of, how I sort of got things working. And but Ryan was one of these guys who, I've met a lot of people in my life, a lot of people, and I have never ever met anyone that comes even close to the intelligence that this guy's got.
Wow.
Absolutely nowhere near it. He's the smartest guy I've ever met in my life.
How did you fight yourself back to positivity and out of the hard times?
Oh, just by working and sort of, it was certainly a big reality check when somebody knocks you off for 9.1, you know, that but for me it was something that I had to do was made sure that everyone got paid. And you go, and that's why we've still got a lot of guys today that we've had for many, many years, and at no stage during that time did they ever miss a pay packet.
I like to believe in the saying, good things happen to good people, and as dark as those days may have been, they didn't last, and your decade since has been vastly different. A wonderful achievement.
Yeah, it has been very different, and that's come through obviously the management of Ryan, and certainly bringing into the place the Penske organisation, which the way they do things is significantly different to what we do here, but not that different in the way the place is run, if you know what I mean. You can have a look at every single guy we have in the place. There's not one American here. There's nothing like that. Originally, for the first 12 months, they had people in place here, or a person particularly in place here who, as a team manager, just to install certain, I suppose, functions within the business.
Yep. So they're standardised across the business, irrespective of their team.
Yeah, they sort of, put their policies in here, and right at the very top of everything, and as you can probably see walking through the place, that right at the very top of everything they do is they put presentation.
Yeah.
And Roger always said that you get the presentation right and everything else will follow.
As a team owner these days, when you drive into a racetrack, the cars, the crowds, the competition, does it still give you that feeling, or has that feeling changed over the years?
Even, which you can't do these days, unfortunately, but even sitting watching the TV, I still get the butterflies.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is there a final chapter in the Dick Johnson's story, or is it yet to be written?
I suppose when I fall off the perch, mate, but that's not going to happen anytime soon, I can tell you. But no, I think we'll continue on. Who knows what happens? The way things are at the moment, it's changed a lot of things, and what goes from here, because it changes on a daily basis. So I have no idea where this is all going to end up. But at the end of the day, mate, I'll still be trying to drive round a Ford.
Been a wonderful career, a wonderful life. Dick Johnson, you, sir, are a legend.
Oh, I'm just an ordinary dude.
A new episode of the Legends series drops every Tuesday and the weekly Wodge every Thursday. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening and follow us on social media at The Andy Raymond. Then you won't miss a thing. Come back soon